What's up guys, how you doing? So today I am in Tullymore Forest in County Down, and today's video is going to be about REST template builder. So what is that? So recently I was looking at the Spring code base and I was looking at new features within Spring Boot, and previously I had auto-wired a REST template in. I had built that up manually with my RequestFactory, but with REST template builder, when you Spring Boot, that'll automatically be instantiated, so you can auto wire that into your bean, and that'll automatically pick up the HTTP request factory of your choice. So that depends what you have in your class path, and it gives you nice settings, so you can set the connect timeout, the read timeout, all that good stuff. And you can also set the likes of basic authentication by supplying in your username and password. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. I'm here, I've just walked about 10k or so, just hiking up in the Tullymore Forest. So this time we're doing up the mountain trail, and I hope you guys enjoy this. So I'll show you some scenery. So this is just the top of the mountain here. I'm just on the way down, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. Hi guys, I hope you're all well. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can use the Spring REST template builder class to build up your REST template, which can then be used to make your RESTful service calls over the network. And this was introduced in Spring 1.4.0, and it's a really cool class, a really cool builder class that I'm sure you guys are going to love. And it can be used instead of manually configuring your HTTP request factory and wiring that in to your manually configured REST template. So what you want to do is go ahead and open up a Spring Starter project. What I'm going to do is bring in, I'm going to create a project called Account Client, and from there I want to bring in the web dependency, and I'm also going to bring in the configuration processor from Spring Boot. So if I type in configuration, you're going to bring in this, as we're going to be using properties files, and I'll show you why I use that in a second. So go ahead and finish the project, let that all import in and start up, and we'll get coding. So the first thing I want to do is actually go ahead and look at the service that I'm going to call, and this is a service I created in a few tutorials ago, and it's a really simple service that just returns a string, and it's sitting at this URL. So pretty simple, right? I'm just going to start that up in a minute when I'm ready to call it. Well, the account client, you'll see in here we have one class. It's the boilerplate Spring Boot application class. Well, what we want to do is go ahead and create a new class, which is going to be a component. So we're going to annotate it with a component, and it's going to be our account client. So go ahead, create class. I'm going to call this account client and click finish. And now I'm going to just annotate this with component so it gets picked up by Spring Boot. And what I want to do is actually create a constructor here, and that's going to take in the REST template builder. And that's actually this class, the REST template builder. It's going to be automatically available to us without having to do anything. As long as we have the web dependency in our POM, then it'll be in the class path for us. So that's the Spring Boot starter web. So if you go ahead and just create a constructor for your method here, and what we're going to do is bring in the REST template builder. We're going to call this builder. And what we're also going to do is take in a properties file called account client properties, which doesn't exist yet, of course. And what we want to do is go ahead and build up our REST template, and we're going to build the REST template based on the properties we have here. So go ahead and create the properties file. So I'm just going to create it in the same package I'm using here. So this should be in a package called client. So I'm going to move my client into that package. And what I want to do here is I'm going to annotate this with configuration properties. And inside here we're going to give it a prefix, and we're going to call it account.client. And we're also going to annotate this with component, so that Spring will automatically allow us to auto-wire this bean into our account client class. So inside here, we're going to define some properties. So what we want is typically any service, you want to read timeout. You never want to sit there and never timeout. It's absolutely critical. We also want to connect timeout. So it's also very important. So how long does it take to actually connect to the service, and how long can you read that service for? And we also want username, and we also want password available, because we're going to be using basic authentication in this example. And typically we want a URL to call, so we're going to have an account service URL. So go ahead and save all that. It's going to say these aren't being used, so I'm going to go ahead and create my getters and setters for this class, and we're ready to rock. So now if you go into your source main resources and open up the properties file, I'm going to just import this in. So if you go up, open your properties file, you'll see that in our properties file here, we have read timeout, connect timeout. So if you go ahead and type account.client and full stop, you'll see that we automatically have the IntelliSense of the properties we have defined just from our code here. So that's really, really nice feature of Spring. So we want to go ahead and type read timeout. We're going to set a read timeout of, I don't know, like 2 seconds. So this is in milliseconds. And account.client. And we also have our connect timeout. I'm just going to set this 2 seconds as well. And of course, we can just go through these and set these all. So we're going to set a username. That's going to be Philip. And then we're going to set a password. And of course, you always want this to be encrypted at rest. But of course, I'm not showing you guys in this tutorial how to do that. But so you'd never want this in plain text in your code base. We also have URL. So account service URL, and that is going to be, so let me go and get that. I actually have this in my other class. So localhost port 8080, service version 1. So I'm going to paste that in. So this is going to be our URL we're going to be using. So go ahead and save that. We can close this properties now, and they're automatically going to be injected into our class here, our properties file, which is automatically going to be injected into our client along with the REST template builder. So what do we want to do with that? Well, we want to start actually building up our REST template builder. So the first thing we want to do is say builder dot, and we want to set the read timeout. So I'm going to go through the REST template class in a minute and show you that. So I'm going to say props dot get read timeout, very important, and then we're going to say set connect timeout, and we also get that from our properties. And then we can say basic authentication. So basic authorization. If you're using that in your services, then you can use this. If not, you can use whatever authentication authorization you are using. So in this, we're going to say props dot get username, and of course we want our password. So it's going to be props dot get password, and because I'm using a char array for my password, I'm going to say value off, and I'm going to pass that in that way. And what we also want to do is now just build this. So this is going to return our REST template, and we want to actually auto-wire that. Not auto-wire that, we want to set that into our REST operations, which is the interface that REST template implements, and we're just going to call that REST. So this will allow us to make RESTful service calls. So we're going to say this.rest, set read timeout, connect timeout, basic authorization, and build. So that's pretty cool. And what we also want is the URL. So instead of auto-wiring the properties, which is perfectly fine, I'm just going to take the one property out, which is going to be the account service URL. And I'm going to assign that from the properties. So I'm just going to say this.account service URL equals props.get account service URL. So now we're ready to roll and actually call our service. So I'm going to create one method in here, and that's going to be the method that's going to actually call our service. So I'm going to say get account name linked to, and then link to the account ID. So get the account name linked to the account ID. Makes sense. And what we're going to do is return rest dot get for object. So we're going to get an object, and we're going to call the URL. We're going to specify our response type, which is going to be a string because we're not using any POJOs in this here. And the URI variable, that's going to be the account ID. So in here we say account service URL. In here we want a string class, and the URI variable is the account ID. As you remember from our properties file, the account ID is going to be now substituted inside this, which also matches our service that we're going to be calling, if you remember, which is also this. So let's go back into our account client. Let's save that. Let's have a wee look at the REST operations class now. Sorry, not the REST operations, the REST template builder. So the REST template builder, when it starts up, it has a request factory candidates. And what that's going to do is try to find out which request factory that you're using on your class path. So if you do not specify a class path, which you can do through actually calling the method RequestFactory, well, it's going to come back and it's going to loop through all of these classes and see if it's present. So if it's present, it's going to try and instantiate it. So at the moment, I don't have any in my class path, so it's not going to be able to find any, and it's going to return the Spring's simple client HTTP request factory, which I'll show you now. So as you see, I have some breakpoints in here, as I was having a little bit of fun breakpointing and running the Spring codebase yesterday. So what I want to do is actually go in here and go into my account client application, and I'm going to change this to implement the command line runner. So what that's going to do is when my application runs, it's automatically going to run this method for me. And what I'm going to do is auto wire in the account client. And what I'm going to do is just call, so account client dot get object link to ID, which is going to be 5 in this case. And I also want to print that, so let's bring in a logger. And what we want to do is go ahead and just write some login statements. So I'm going to say logger.info client name, and what I'll also do is write a couple of other statements just before we actually call the service. So in here I'll say calling account service, and I'll also write in here finish calling account service. So if I go ahead and actually start up this account service, so I'm going to run that, and that's going to be at port 8080. And once that starts, I'm going to run the account client application. So you run as Spring Boot app, and we'll see what happens here. So the port is already in use, so I'll go into application.properties and I will change the port. So server.port equals port 9000. So both of them are going to be using 8080, that's why we had a collision there. So I'm going to start the Spring Boot app again. And this time you can see that the service is started up and says calling account service, Philip start is linked to account 5, which is the result from calling across the network into this other service. And that's pretty cool. So let me recap this and basically show you a few more things. So in the REST template builder, we've automatically auto-wired that in and built up a REST template, which implements REST operations based on our account client properties, which are externalized properties in our application.properties file. So these can be different per environment, because you're going to have obviously different passwords per different environments. You're also going to have different URLs environments, and you may have different SLAs in your read and connect timeout. So once they're auto-wired in the REST template builder, it's going to use the HTTP request factory based on what's on your class path. It's also going to set an interceptor, which is going to be using basic authentication to send that through to in the authorization header on every HTTP request going over the wire. And of course you get your read and connect timeouts. So What else do we want to I want to show you? Well, the one thing I want to show you is if I debug this application, I'm going to stop it and I'm going to debug. Well, you're going to see that to prove to you about the RequestFactory, you'll see that when it's going to load up here, it's going to stop when it tries to set the RequestFactory. You'll see that it won't be able to find any here, so there's none on the class path. So it's going to return a simple client HTTP RequestFactory, and it's going to make the HTTP connection over the wire. So if we stop that, go to Java EE, and if we go into our Maven dependencies in this class, well, what I'm going to do is basically drop in the Apache HTTP components HTTP client, which is the first candidate in our unmodifiable map. So this is going to be the first one. So if we go in here and we add in the dependency, and what we're looking for is the group ID of org Apache HTTP components, I believe. So org.apache.http components, and the artifact ID is going to be HTTP client. Yep. So I'm going to format that, I'm going to save that. My workspace is currently being built. I'm then going to debug the application again and see if that uses the HTTP client instead of the simple Spring one. So I'm going to click yes. Well, let's go through here. So it's going to click class loader is present. Well, yes, see, it is present now. So we have that in the class, and it's going to go ahead and use the factory class, which is the HTTP components client RequestFactory builder, and return that instead of the simple client HTTP RequestFactory. So this is very important if you have to use a specific implementation of a RequestFactory. So I'm going to click go ahead and do that, and it's going to, of course, it's going to call across the wire to call our service. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. You know, this is it's a really nice way of creating your REST templates. It's super easy. You don't need any configuration for this. This is just like, here you go, you can run with it. And I also like it because it provides you with some kind of bulkheading, so you're not all REST operations, or not all REST templates are going to have the same timeouts. Typically, you create one REST template and it'd be assigned into lots of different classes. Each one you can associate different timeouts with, which is pretty cool as well. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and I'll be creating lots of more content soon, so I'll see you next time.